Tonight's speaker is Tom Donohue. Tom is the president and CEO of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Donohue understands that a strong economy is critical to the well-being of all Americans. He shares with me the deep appreciation that empowering nature through free enterprise and our nature through the free enterprise system. Few things are more civil than enabling people to provide for themselves and to provide for others. In a recent quote, Mr. Donohue speaks to his passion and understanding of the merits of our economic system. And Tom, I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to quote you. It says, "Free enterprise is not perfect. None of us are. But it provides one thing that most other systems don't, and that is opportunity. Sometimes you take a risk and you fail. The beauty of our system is that you just keep trying." At this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Dillenschneider, Bob Dillenschneider, to come forward and make an introduction of our speaker tonight, Tom Donohue. And I had a few moments to share with Mr. Donohue before coming into this room, and I think you're going to be extremely impressed with what you hear tonight. Thank you.
We're very fortunate to have one of Tom Donohue's caliber here. This is an extraordinary man. I could talk with you about Tom Donohue's efforts to make us energy independent. And if you think about our pals in Syria, in Egypt, and other parts of the Middle East, you can determine if that's important. I could talk to you about Tom Donohue's efforts to repair the infrastructure in the United States. And if you think about traveling on I-95, you can see why that's important. I could talk to you about Tom Donohue's efforts to deal with an avalanche of regulation that is now on the books, thanks to, with all respect, our president. And he's fought against that again and again. Regulation that affects your life, affects my life, the lives of our kids. I could talk to you about Tom Donohue's efforts to deal with intellectual property. And who knows who's stealing America's secrets? It's happening all over the world. Tom Donohue is fighting against it. We could talk about all of those topics, but what I really would like to say in the introduction of Tom Donohue is that this is a man who stands for the same values that every man and woman in this room stands for. This is an American, no question about it. This is a man who recognizes what it was like after the Second World War, when the Americans came out of the Second World War and the greatest generation took hold. This is a man who understands the building of America. This is a man who wants to take America to the next step. He's done it again and again. He's been the president of the U.S. Chamber since 1997. One of the toughest jobs to fill in America, and God, I hope it doesn't happen for a long time, is going to be Tom Donohue's job. He's just that kind of guy. So Tom, we're very fortunate to have one of your caliber here tonight. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's nice to be home. I used to live here in Stamford some time ago, up off Long Ridge Road, and I was on my way a few weeks ago to go visit the people over at General Electric, and we were going up, and I said, "Let's go up Long Ridge Road." And I looked around, lived on Laurel Ledge, had to find it for a while, and so one of my guys took a picture of me there, and I sent copies to our children. It didn't look exactly the way I remembered it, but it was still a beautiful place, and a place we had a wonderful time as a family. And Bob, I want to thank you for encouraging me to come and do this. We had a wonderful visit upstairs. We're not sure how wonderful. We'll wait and see when the paper comes out tomorrow. But we had a wonderful visit and had a chance to talk about a lot of issues. Bob and I have been friends for a long time. We are comrades in trying to bring common sense to complicated problems in difficult times. He's done a lot more of that than I have, so I lean on him often to figure out what to do next. And he really has talked to people all over this globe about how to live and promote in a civilized and a civil community. I appreciate the folks that came out tonight. It seems to be filling up as we sit here for a while. I know there are some primaries here. Sure as hell is a primary in New York City, and we don't know what's going to happen there. Mr. Mayor and people from the library and from the city, thank you for coming. And as I said, this is a homecoming, so I try and be brief enough that we can quickly get to the questions, which I assure you will be far more interesting than what I might have to say. Today I'd like to discuss a few things, why I believe civility is a personal responsibility, some of the factors that may be contributing to a more coarse society and culture, and what the business community and others can do to address that challenge. Fundamentally, civility starts at home. Mahatma Gandhi once advised us to be the change that you would wish to see in the world. In other words, if you want to begin to solve a problem, start by looking in the mirror and figure out what you can do to bring some solution. And each of us has a personal responsibility to ensure that we practice what we preach. We're all good preachers. If you think what we say to our children and our grandchildren might be a good idea if we listen to it. At the Chamber, we're pretty much a rough and tumble kind of business. We lobby the governments in Washington and around the world. We represent businesses in the court of law. We sue the federal government 150 or 170 times a year. We operate before the regulatory agencies, and we deal with the press morning, noon, and night, and we work in the court of public opinion. We work to hammer out common positions and principles among 3 million very diverse companies and state and local chambers and industry groups, and that's probably the hardest part of our job. While we represent 3 million companies, we have 300,000 direct members. We vigorously defend the free enterprise system at a very, very challenging time. And we do all of this in the face of criticism and attacks from some pretty serious and worthy adversaries. It's not for the faint of heart. But one thing I always tell our members and our employees, especially new employees, especially young employees, is that no matter how tough the battles or how big the responsibilities, don't forget the rules of engagement under which we operate. And that is pretty simple. Conduct yourself with high integrity, operate with good manners. You don't have to be a jerk to be tough. And after that, let the barroom brawl begin. I have another one that they didn't put in this script, and I always say, nobody in this place is allowed to hire anybody as dumb as you are. And while everybody laughs about that, it is a great part of the success we have, because we have very decentralized, very flat organizations. You need people who go out and do it. And so we work that very, very hard. Well, I'm sort of joking about the barroom brawl stuff, but I'm damn serious about the integrity and good manners deal, and we simply won't tolerate people that don't play by those rules, because in my business, every battle that you have is only a small time period before you have to go back and have another discussion or another engagement with the very same people, and if you're dumb enough to make it personal, it gets really hard. The way I put it, you can be tough, but you don't need to be a jerk. We also encourage our folks at the Chamber to be open to different ideas and alternative opinions. Don't just talk to those whom you agree. And that's a habit in Washington all the time. If you're not in my party, if you're not in my issue, if you're not in my engagement, then I really don't know that I need to talk to you. But the most successful people go out and visit and get to know people and know what they think and what they believe. By the way, we don't do presidential politics. If you ask me questions, maybe you'll ask me a question, later on I'll talk to you about what we do politically, but I will say that part of this president's problems is he didn't, in the first 5 years, make those kind of relationships with people of both parties that you can go to on a tough day and say, time out, politics aside, I need you. And if you haven't done it, it's pretty hard. Sometimes I'm asked, are we wasting our time talking to other people? Well, more often than not, we learn something from it. We make a relationship that it someday will help. Occasionally, you can establish a certain respect and rapport, and when things really get ugly, people will come and help you. You can pick up a lot of insights, but the worst thing that happens is you just get smarter, so go ahead and do it. That's how we try to conduct ourselves. Lord knows we're far from perfect, but I like to say civility is something we all need to take personally and work on every day. Let me talk about some of the factors that we think underline this civility question. So what are some of those? What are the things that might be making America a less civil society? Although people always want to tell me that, you know, they say, it's so tough in the Congress now, there's no civility. Listen, you study a little history. There was a time in the US Congress where they beat the hell out of each other with canes. They maimed each other. Well, it wasn't as bad as what some people could do in the press, but it was dangerous. And not the press here, I'm talking about the press in Washington. I think it's clear that tough economic times can make us less civil. We're less civil because we're frightened. We're less civil because we're trying to hold together not only our companies and our families and our individual financial circumstances, but we have a hard time looking ahead and wondering, you know, what does this all mean for us? It sure helps in government, too. You go talk to the folks in North Dakota where their coffers are full with money, cash, because they're pumping it out of the ground as fast as they can. And, you know, people that are working in McDonald's are making $70,000. Now, that may be a bit of an exaggeration, but it has happened in some places out there. So I think you can guess the answer to ask them whether the debates over surpluses are more civil than the debates over shortages. And I'm going to talk a bit about shortages in the question and answer, and some of that is scary. But when citizens and governments must share in scarcity, when jobs are few, when opportunities are limited, and when families are struggling economically, divisions and rancor in our communities become more to the fore. Resentment, anger, and envy grow. I was telling the Prime Minister of Canada not long ago, he's very frustrated with our country for a lot of reasons, pipelines and other things. And I said, Mr. Prime Minister, you know, we would never treat our friends that way. It would be inappropriate. And he said, well, I thought we were friends. I said, no, you're family. We treat our family terribly. We never treat our friends that way. We've made some improvements in our economic circumstances since 2008, but the fact is we're stuck in the weakest and slowest economic recovery since World War II. Under such conditions, it's part of human nature to blame someone else for our difficult circumstances. Many of us are looking for scapegoats, and regrettably, some of our politicians are all too willing to oblige. But I will tell you as we go on, the big problem we have, nobody's guilty. As I'll discuss later on, revving up the engines of America's growth and making sure that the benefits are broadly shared would make things a lot better. Change and uncertainty can also contribute to a lack of civility, especially as we grapple with new realities of globalization and technology. Most of the guys my age, you know, it's not even my sons who are brilliant, tell me how to do technology. It's my 10-year-old grandson that I call to come over and make this damn thing work. And it's just amazing. And people are really worried about demographics. Demographics are a reality. We're all living longer. Demographics are destiny. And if you look around the world, if you look at what's going on in China, if you look at what's going on in Europe, When you look at what's going on in lots of places around the world, we're in better shape than everybody, but demographics are scary because how are we going to deal with this aging population? Americans have historically handled change and uncertainty better than most, but in modern times, change and uncertainty can quickly add up to fear and insecurity, and that fear and insecurity can trigger, I think, less civil response from one to the other. Right now, we're trying to get a potentially historic immigration bill passed the Congress, and we will, by the way. Can't tell you exactly whether it'll happen right before the end of the year, happen right over the end of the year. We got it out of the Senate. We'll get it out of the House. We fundamentally need it as a society, and if we don't, we'll be looking at an aging population here, a younger population over there, not the people we need to add to our population to do what we need to create jobs, to provide services, and keep us competitive. And we've got to do it for the sake of our economy and our security and our legacy as an open and welcoming nation. While there are many viewpoints on this debate, anyone can agree that the system is not totally fixed. As this debate unfolds, so far I've been pleased and relieved by the relative lack of recrimination directed at, quote, these people, which I've heard far too many times, the immigrants who have come here, some illegally, in search of a better life for themselves and their children. There are legitimate questions to debate about the proper course to take on immigration. Most participants in this debate are doing so on the merits. That's new. This is the third time I've been in that debate, and we're finally getting somewhere. One of the reasons is we cut a deal with the AFL-CIO. They got a need, we've got a need, maybe we can get a result. If you want to know what the need is, ask me later. But there can be no reason for lashing out at these people, because guess what? Virtually all of us, or once were, are, or once were these people. The aging society is another unstoppable demographic reality and really a fearsome change that could undermine our unity as a country and erode our civility. 10,000 baby boomers retire, half of them die, but I'll explain the number. 10,000 baby boomers retire every day this year, and every day for the next 17 years until we have 77 million people. Now, during that period of time, we have some good physicians here. During that period of time, about half that number traditionally would expire, but it's not going to be that high because we're continuing expanding life expectancy. So just think about the huge number of people that are going to be getting Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, state benefits. I mean, it's going to be unbelievable. Almost every one of these people, rich, poor, or somewhere in between, is expected to be supported by our massive entitlement programs. You know, it's interesting. Go ask somebody you know that's really old and that's been collecting this stuff forever and say, what, you know, maybe we'd have to cut it back 10%. Get out of the way. There will be a hue and cry. I paid for this, they owe it to me, and I'm going to get it. Yeah, unless it runs out. The chamber is leading the fight for entitlement reform. Common sense modifications acted upon now in order to avoid a much greater pain later on. The economics alone are compelling enough. These programs are already consuming all the money the federal government now collects in income taxes. Did you hear that? They consume every dollar we collect in income taxes. We're doing the rest of it on other taxes and on debt. Big problem. But more than economics is at stake. So is the very unity of our society. America cannot afford the kind of intergenerational conflict that will inevitably occur if we continue to force a massive transfer of wealth from the young to the old. And think about it. That's what we're doing by consuming all of this money in what we would call the old. I believe that our country's failings in this arena, the failing of public education, has also contributed to a more divided and less civil society. There's a lot of focus on the income divide in our country. There ought to be more focus on the educational divide, and that's something we need to work on. Perhaps more than any other factor, the level and quality of a child's education determines his or her income potential. But it does much more. A good education teaches young people to think, to explore, to innovate, to set goals, to be personally responsible and disciplined, and to open their minds to the wider world of ideas and cultures. To be sure, there are plenty of highly educated people in America who are rude, closed-minded. Maybe you know some of them, or maybe some of them are in your family. But by failing so many of our young people through an inferior education system in many places, who can deny that we are undermining their chance to participate fully, effectively, and lawfully in their community? And let me briefly mention two factors that I believe are contributing significantly to the decline of civility in American life. The first is the proliferation of media outlets, entertainment opportunities, and channels of instant communication, all delivered to us courtesy of an often anonymous internet. This is mostly a positive and empowering development, but we need to recognize and work on the downsides. It's easier now to self-select our news, clicking only on those opinions that we already control and agree with. It's more tempting now to speak before we think, and to do so in short, sensationalized bursts, no more than 18 letters, that provoke and even insult. And given all the competition for eyes and ears and the entertainment provided, they're often driven to extremes to attract those people of shock and awe in order to build audiences, which is in turn has seriously lowered the standards of accuracy and good taste. The last factor I'd mention before discussing some possible solutions is the reality that the American people are politically and philosophically divided almost 50-50, right down the middle. In fact, recent polls have asked Americans whether they believe the federal government should do more or should do less. And guess what? 50-50. In fact, we're also going through an intergenerational transformation. What does that mean? Lots of old people are leaving the Congress and leaving the Senate and leaving government, particularly the senior staffers that we desperately need. And at the same time, lots of people that are coming into the government without much experience are far more on the far poles. So the middle, the bridge you need to go across, to be civil and make a deal, is very fragile. The decline of the political center, to me, has amplified the ideological voices and quieted the common sense voices, which we will get back. The result is a less civil, more bombastic political conversation that frankly disgusts many Americans and prevents our government from solving our problems. And they all complain to me about that. And I say, wait a minute. What are you complaining to me for? You sent them here. They're yours. You know, when you see the polls, they say, before the last election, I think it was 17%. It was the highest number of the approval of the Congress. And yet, because of the way the districts are all gerrymandered, they're all sent back, 90-some% were sent back to serve us. Now, this is all a challenge, but let's not be too nostalgic about the past. Our politics have often, as I said, been vicious from the very beginning. Jefferson once called Hamilton the son of a whore, and Hamilton publicly exposed Jefferson's affair with his slave. I don't know that we would even do that. Now, during the debate over the abolishment of slavery, one senator senator, when I told you, nearly caned a senator that he was arguing with to death, and if it wasn't for some intervention at the last minute, he probably would have died. Incivility has long been a problem, but the imperative is to address it has never been more urgent. And so when politicians posture, insult, and demagogue, what happens? Americans tune them out. Problems fester. Challenges go unmet. And our legacy as a can-do nation that embraces ideas and bold solutions diminishes. So what about now? So let's talk about a few possible solutions, and then we'll get on for some conversation. I'd like to tell you that I have some new groundbreaking insights. I don't. But I've learned over the years that complex and seemingly intractable problems cry out for very simple solutions. So my thought is this: we need to get back to the basics, including reaffirming and strengthening two fundamental values: our right to free speech and our right to free enterprise. They are by no means cure-alls, but I'm convinced affirming these values will not only help restore civility in our country, but will also restore opportunity and freedom. In other words, the American dream. Let's begin with free speech. You can't rebuild civility without first recognizing and respecting everyone's right to speak. That's why people came to this country. And free speech is more than just the right to say something. It's the right to speak with democratic influence, by which I mean the right to fully participate in the public and political affairs of our communities and our nation, no matter what your views are. Intentionally or unintentionally, for good motives or bad, a lot of people are trying to over-regulate speech, to constrain our ability to petition the government, to impose overly restrictive speech codes on campuses and other institutions, and even to use powerful arms of the government, such as the IRS, to discriminate against speech that they don't like. And we've got to aggressively oppose and guard against attacks on free speech. So please understand, if we lose our constitutionally protected right to speak and to disagree with you, it won't be because we let some dictator yank it away from us. It'll be because we collectively let Americans let it slip away. There's a reason why the right to free speech is in our First Amendment to the Constitution. Our founding fathers understood it was fundamentally important. Let me give a few examples of why, from my world, of how speech is being stifled. Labor unions, shareholder activists, and anti-business policymakers have long sought to drive the voice of the business community out of the political process. Simple reason: if we're not there, it's easy to win. If you want to do something else, just look at what we're paying in union pensions and so on, as talking to the mayor. The Securities and Exchange Commission has been asked by groups to make a rule that would compel public companies to disclose their spending on independent political speech, which is clearly protected by the Constitution. The idea here is to bring these companies' political spending to light so that they can be targeted, harassed, and extorted. In 2010, some in Congress tried to sway the midterm elections in their favor through a disclosure act. They didn't win. We did. The bill was defeated, but business opponents still want to see principles enacted, and some lawmakers are working to revive the legislation. Proponents of such efforts claim they're simply pushing for transparency. Don't be fooled. What they really want is silence. They really want me not to speak. They want you not to speak. They want to speak. The aim is to do that by regulating speech, and I don't think, and then intimidating other speakers. I don't think it's going to happen. Well, then, the fight on these ideas will continue. We've got to tell the American people that some of them are dead wrong, but we've got to move on and look at what else is important in speech. Most of our rights in a free society carry responsibilities. So it's not, by the way, if you go down to a movie theater, I saw a nice cop around here before, you go in the middle of that movie, and tonight you stand up and you yell, fire, 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 and there's no fire, that cop's going to take you and lock you up. That's not free speech. Irresponsible behavior to the detriment of the society is not free speech. I strongly believe that the right to speak carries with it many responsibilities. In my view, it's the stubborn refusal to listen that is the cause of much of the incivility and dysfunction we see in Washington and across the country today. You can't demand free speech if you aren't prepared to listen. Earlier, I mentioned the need for entitlement reform. That's a classic example of how a problem can get out of hand, not just because people disagree about the solutions, but because most people refuse to even recognize the problem. They simply don't want to hear it. Restoring civility in American life has got to begin by reaffirming the commitment to speak and to listen. You know, you can also restore civility by reaffirming our commitment to free enterprise and to the growth and jobs and opportunities that a real free enterprise system can deliver. It's not perfect, but free enterprise is the best, and I would argue the fairest and the most civilized economic system in the world. It offers more opportunity, more personal dignity, more freedom, and more broadly shared prosperity than any other system. Properly implemented, it strives to deliver equality of opportunity, not results. It recognizes and rewards the honor and dignity of work, from blue collar to white collar and everything in between. It allows people, this is really important, to take a risk and fail, fall flat on their face, get up and try again without being stigmatized, and when you succeed, to get rewarded. There's not a banker in this room, if there are any, that wants to lend money to a new business that hasn't already had a failure. In Japan, if you do that, you don't get a second chance. This is a great part of America. This is the system that made America the strongest economy on earth. It's the system that makes the American dream possible, and during this pivotal time for our nation, a system that deserves a reaffirmation from all of us. Free enterprise can help us address the most urgent need facing our country: more good-paying jobs. On Friday, the latest jobs report were released. On the surface, it shows a little meddling progress, but it wasn't. With 169,000 jobs created and the unemployment rate ticking down from 7.4 to 7.3%, we didn't count the ones we changed from the last 2 months. Plus, the numbers came down by people withdrawing from the system. We have got to deal with this. We've got to deal with it. The unemployment rate is dropping, but we still have a massive number of people unemployed. And some of those people are never going to go back to work. And somebody here ought to ask me about the manufacturing business later. I have a lot to say about it. Even college graduates are having difficulty finding jobs. Depends on what they studied. Depends on what they know. Depends on where they live. And many of them not even getting married and having children because they're afraid of falling behind financially. Teen unemployment rates, especially with minorities, are very bad. And it's a serious matter for our society. It's about more than just a regular paycheck. It's human dignity, being fully engaged in society and being involved in something larger than yourself. It's dignity. This undercuts the American dream and undermines civility. And that's why reaffirming our commitment to free enterprise and engaging its principles to create more jobs and growth is imperative. A robust growing economy powered by free enterprise will not solve all of our problems in this global world, but it'll lift our spirits a bit and it'll lift our sights. And we can find improvements that we can make in our schools and lots of other things through this system. It will help us bridge the potential divide we face as we struggle to care for growing numbers of elderly while also preserving and expanding opportunities for the young. And it can put America back to work and help us recapture our legacy of leadership as an exceptional can-do nation, a world leader with an economic and moral influence that is second to none. So let me conclude with just a couple of sentences by saying that when it comes to restoring civility, it's a personal commitment. You got to do it one person at a time. And like some of you, I'm frequently asked to address students or speak at their graduations. Also, they're looking for clues and secrets of how to achieve great success. I'm afraid that more than others, more often than not, I disappoint them because I want to leave them with a different message. What I most want to tell these young people is that when you reach a certain age, where most of your life is behind you, what's really going to count, how will you be judged, how will you be remembered? Not by the titles that we have had and that we have held, the points that you have scored, or the money that you have made, but by the simple test of how you treated others. Your family, your friends, the people who worked for you, and even the strangers in the street. Treat them all with kindness and civility. Speak thoughtfully and listen. Listen well, and go out of your way to teach and to help. For at the end of the day, that's how you'll really be judged, and that's how you will be remembered. But a parting thought, if you do that, in many cases it seems that in many ways that that attitude results in better jobs, better citizens, and better livelihoods. And so thank you very much. I probably shot the schedule a little, but I'll be glad to take any question you have on any subject under the following rules. A, I either know the answer or I immediately make it up. B, you will tell me who you are. Who wants the first question? Going once. Yeah, go ahead. I think there are multiple answers. First of all, let me just tell you about the manufacturing business. In the last 12 years, 15, we've probably taken 45% of the jobs out of the manufacturing business, and they're never coming back, ever. We took them out because of information technology and robotics and process engineering and supply chain management. And by the way, we'll probably take out some more because we have to compete in a global economy. We've got, whatever we're making, we've got to compete with people that are trying to make it better and in some ways cheaper. And so you face that reality. But today, if I could find 1.5 million young people who could read and write well, who could do math up to serious algebra, that could run computers and more than just work on their little phone, who could work in a social environment and could pass a drug test, we could put them to work right now in the manufacturing business, which would immediately, over a year, create another 1.5 million jobs. Right now today, there are at least 50 companies from around Europe in the United States looking for places to set up factories and distribution centers because of the price of energy in the United States. In the energy business, which, by the way, is our big surprise, we finally figured out that we have more of it than anyone else. In the energy business, in 1 year, we created, I said, 1.7 million jobs, put a lot of people to work, and paid $63 billion to private landowners and to state landowners. And if we could get on the federal lands and get this stuff out and export some of it and bring people here to build and use our energy and bring all the, it's going to bring a lot of the chemical companies back because, natural gas is the seed corn. So you could go on and on and on. But for me, it's fundamentally education, Stop the deal. We need regulation. We need to regulate a lot of things, but we don't need to try and compete with the Europeans, who are basically out of business in a lot of ways, to be the most regulated, benefit-oriented society. We need to balance the system. People will build things, they'll open up companies, they'll start small companies, they'll do all of that if they think they have a chance to get good people. And we all know small companies don't get their money from banks to start with. But if they can find good people and they have minimal regulation, responsible regulation, I think you can get there in a free enterprise system. And if you stop beating up on business and thinking that the best thing to do is tax it. I could go on for hours, but trust me, this country is the most inventive country in the world. And you guys, in whatever your private equity issues are, you've figured out a way to survive and a way to make the companies that you're running more effective, more efficient, with less people. And we're going to just do efficient things and then do more of them. Do I believe that can happen? I do. Hello? Yeah. Ah, made my day. Oh, okay, good.
But I was just asking a question about civility of politics because we're from Washington. And we see on news and in the papers and on cable, somebody's on MSNBC or Fox, people, in the country think they know what they're going to say already before they even open their mouth. How do we get away from this, this gridlock and the caricatures or the stereotypes that we've come to in politics?
Well, first of all, we don't want to get rid of all gridlock. That'd be a bad idea, because then we'll have everything people are suggesting. And I was trying to remember how many bills are introduced in the House and Senate in a year. It's thousands of them. Thousands of them. And most of them we don't want. So a little bit of gridlock's not bad. And as I said, we're going through a transition there. It is very interesting to look at the media. I was today visiting with the guy that runs Fox and News, and it's a very interesting thing. And they attract not only the conservatives, but most of the independents, and even some people moving over into the more liberal. And you know why they do it? It hadn't got anything to do with what they say. For starters, they have better lighting, they have better music, they have better sets, they have more interesting kinds of people, a lot of different commentators. I mean, they've got all kinds of people on there I don't agree with, but they spend tons of money on it, and so they're pulling a bigger audience. Look, I go on all the shows, and my deal is I'm going to tell them the same story wherever I am. But it is true, the whole media thing has changed. I mean, when we were doing this thing, Bob, originally we had 3 big stations and CNN, and that was just starting. And we had a couple of radio stations, and we had big newspapers in big cities and little newspapers in small cities. And he and I are old enough that we had a morning paper and an afternoon paper. But you know how to deal with all those. But now you've got every kind of blog you ever saw in your life. Our guys, because we operate globally, and because of all that, we are almost at a 24-hour deal in running our communication stuff, because the stuff just keeps coming out. And a lot of this stuff on blogs, the way you get a bad story out, you start it way down here somewhere, and then somebody else picks it up, and then it becomes, then the legitimate news guys can look at it and say, I got a story there, and by the way, you got a legitimate news guy here, but everybody told me that. They've got a problem because they don't have as much resource working on the newspaper business, and it's your fault because you all don't read as many newspapers as you used to read, so don't complain. And this whole thing is fundamentally changing, and it goes back to what I was saying about my grandson. I mean, they're all living in a different world. They get their information in a different world. In the political world, it's absolutely crazy trying to do a poll on who's going. Well, because the small number of copper wire telephones we have. Most young people I have, they don't have telephones at home. They got them in their pocket. What do they have one at home for? So this is all changing. But you'll have to tell me how we know each other later. Yes? Yeah. The question is, why do so many people leave the state of Connecticut, and why has the economy, the only state in the union, the economy shrunk last year? Roughly? Well, people leave because to go get jobs. People leave to avoid a rather difficult tax situation in the state. People leave to retire. And so you'd have to look at Connecticut's numbers, how many people were retiring and moving south. People come or stay, young people, if there's good jobs here. You know, I've been around long enough that I remember if you want to know anything about insurance, you go to Hartford. Wasn't anywhere else around that was insurance, and now it's everywhere. You know, it's all over the place. It's all over the world. And I'm sure that Connecticut will figure it out. It's got great location. I also remember when Connecticut had a very favorable tax issue compared, and you know, Fairfield County sort of sticks into New York compared to New York. Actually, New York's got real problems on the tax side. I wish I knew a little more about the Connecticut scene, but I'll look at it and call you. We clearly would have a bigger economy if we had more skilled people. And we would hire them, and we're bringing all sorts of manufacturing back from Asia because of the price of energy, and from Europe because of their economy. By the way, a little sidebar, Europe is our largest export partner. Europe is China's largest export partner. So if those two, the central bankers in Germany, they're the best ones that we got over there, say that Europe will be negative growth for 10 years. Now, I don't think so, because we're trying to get a free trade agreement with them that would drive both of our jobs and growth. But just to give you an idea, and if we had some more people, we now have energy, meaning hydrocarbons. If we had some more people, talented people, that were willing to move to where we want it. You know, it's a big country. And a lot of the stuff we're doing are places, you know, like faraway lands, like Oregon and Washington and Montana and North Dakota and Ohio. And, you know, a lot of people don't want to move anywhere. And might have to move. People did that back after the Depression. They moved all over the country. And so, you know, it's good skill, mobility. And by the way, the education system, it costs us a fortune. And some of it's good. I mean, look, I guess if you live most of Fairfield County, you can send your kids, only place I really know here, you can send your kids to the schools. I lived for a long time in Potomac, Maryland. And we sent all our kids to the public schools. Not sure I would do it again. I mean, I would do it again if it were then. So, but when you get down to it, this is demographics tops everything. And that demographics is not only how many there are, how old they are, how healthy they are, but it's how educated they are. It's complicated, but if you open up the door, get rid of some of the regulations, give people an opportunity, give them educated people that are willing to move where the business is, things will pick up. And I just ran out of time. Thank you very much.